The Gaelic Games, explained by Shayla Morris. The history and origin of the Gaelic Games. The Gaelic Games were founded in the 17th century. The Gaelic Games were first played in small villages all across Ireland. Gentry landowners and noblemen organized the games of hurling, rugby, and Gaelic football. However, rugby is no longer included in today's Gaelic Games. Gambling was also very common, and many people bet their livestock. The origin of the Gaelic Games continued. Before the GAA existed, the games existed in various forms throughout the centuries. The most known form of the games that existed was called the Tailteann Games. They were named after a Celtic goddess, although it is unclear which one. The Tailteann Games were a Celtic sporting festival that started in 1829 BC. These were the inspiration that the GAA used when starting the blueprint for the Gaelic Games and what they are today. The first event of the first Gaelic Games. The Gaelic Games are played similar to the way in which we have sport seasons, such as basketball season or football season. All sports involved in the games, hurling, handball, Gaelic football, and Caimhnaigh, are played at the same time, kind of like how sometimes football and basketball overlap seasons. These are similar how different sports are played at the same time during the Olympics, but not during the same event. The first official game that took place as part of the Gaelic Games was a Gaelic football game. The first game took place in Callan, Kilkenny in February of 1885, although it is not documented as to who played the game. So the governing bodies of the Gaelic Games is the GAA. The GAA was born November 1st in 1884 at a commercial hotel. GAA stands for the Gaelic Athletic Association. This is known as one of the most defining moments in Ireland's history. The GAA regulates the 4 distinctive games that are played during Gaelic Games: handball, Gaelic football, Caimhnaigh, and hurling. Ireland sees the GAA more than just a sport organization. It is seen as a trust in which the Irish feel they have a common trust to. It's what they feel like they have in common amongst each other is the GAA. All 32 counties on the island of Ireland, including Northern Ireland, compete at the inter-county level along with teams from London, New York, and Warwickshire. So the frequency of the Gaelic Games. So the Gaelic Games take place every year. It's not like a 4-year thing, it's every year. And the regular season of the games takes place between February and May. The semifinals, finals, and relegation playoffs, eventually determining who is crowned champions of the respective league, take place throughout May and sometimes, depending on the weather, into June. The Gaelic Games also practice the promotion and relegation system. The country of the league with the most combined points wins at the end of the games or season. So basically, whatever league wins. The location of the Gaelic Games. Just like teams would travel in America to play different teams in their similar sport, so do the Gaelic game teams. It just depends, like obviously a handball team travels to a handball team. But each country or county primarily has their own stadiums. Some share every now and then, but in every stadium, every one of the 4 games can be played. Dublin has 2 famous stadiums in the Gaelic Games. It's Parnell Park. This is the home of the branch of the Dublin GAA, and Croke Park, which is the headquarters of the GAA. However, Ireland's official stadium is Croke Park, but they often play in Parnell Park because it seats more fans. Parnell Park can seat up to 82,000 people. So the size and scope of the Gaelic Games. The games are hard to be measured in size because the games are played throughout most of Europe. However, we do know that the average size of a stadium for the Gaelic Games seats 80,000 people. So Parnell Park seats about 2,000 more, but a lot of these games are mostly sold out a week before the event. Mostly, a lot of them has to do, about 90% makes up just regular Irish people, and whoever else plays, so like the regular blokes. And then the other 10,000 make up for a lot of tourists coming, because the Gaelic Games are known as one of the must-see things whenever visiting Ireland. As for the scope of the event, it's completely intangible in my opinion. because the games are considered a vital part of Irish culture. And in fact, hurling and camiage are recognized as being protected cultural activities in Ireland. So the growth of the Gaelic Games. The growth of the Gaelic Games are measured by the amount of members in the GAA. So each team and player has to become a member of the GAA in order to compete in the GAA, along with a lot of people who register to become fans or spectators of the GAA games, or not the GAA games, but of GAA sports. Also end up registering in their website so you can get updates. So from there we know in 1990 the GAA had 300-ish members. In the early 1950s, the GAA had 20,000 members. And today, the GAA has over 750,000 members. And are hoping to grow some more within the new year. I make a correction. I did not mean to put 1990. I meant to put 1890. So the profile of the spectators, there's not really a stereotypical Gaelic Games fan as there are in the United States, like a typical, like, northern dad who always wears a cap or a baseball team that are stereotypically, they live in the South, they're a football fan. That's not really the case with the Gaelic Games. Even though they have different sports, there's not really a stereotypical person because there's a little bit of something for everyone. Excuse me. That and just the Gaelic Games are just in Ireland so much that a lot of Irish don't really care what game they're watching as long as they're watching something that they feel is unique to them. So for a profile for the players, there are little differences, but it depends on obviously what game you're playing. Obviously, a hurling player does not need the same attributes as a handball player. So hurling is by far the least fit of all of the sports. Hurling players actually have the most fat on their bodies. This is mainly because they are the ones who usually get pelted with a very hard, fast ball. So it's kind of known that it's helpful to have extra padding because if it hits muscle, it's more likely to become tight and bruised and injured rather than a little chub. So for camiage, all the players are female, which is kind of a big difference. And because remember, camiage is the female version of hurling. So these players are more in shape than the male hurlers, just because they don't throw the ball just quite as hard. Their bodies aren't really prepared for that. But they usually have a slimmer build and are usually in their early 20s. And Gaelic football requires the most athletic physique because Gaelic football is kind of a combination between soccer and rugby and a little bit of American football. So they need all around those skills. So then Gaelic football players are described to have a similar build to a running back, but are large and swift. And then handball players. So handball requires the most hand-eye coordination of the Gaelic Games, and most athletes of handball are more nimble and swift, and not necessarily muscle and toned, just because their sport needs them to run up and down the court quickly and make quick passes. It's not really a contact sport as the other three. So they just are a little more thinner, a little more nimbler. They just don't look like they're about to run somebody over every 5 seconds. So for the media coverage of the games, the media coverage surrounding the Gaelic Games had like a similar start to American sports, if you're familiar with the history. There was a lot of boycotts, blacklisting, and libel, and they were very common when covering the Gaelic Games when they first began. This is because the GAA, from the beginning, when we didn't have PR and knew about everything else. So the GAA fostered a sense that all Gaelic Games players were clean, limbed youths. They're drenched with fine Irish sportsmanship and incapable of mean thought or action. Obviously, that is not true. No person is completely incapable of mean thought or action. They definitely, not all athletes are great sports, obviously. So when the reporters or journalists began to kind of go against this thought, the GAA ordered athletes to boycott the reporters, so they weren't going to feed them any information. So journalists, with nothing to go on and no one to talk to, wrote some slander, just because that's what they did, and they kind of blacklisted, certain teams and games and who followed more, and then when the writers wrote scandal, which led to libel, suits that could only sometimes be settled out of court. So over the years, the games have obviously improved, and the relationship between the media has improved. So today's coverage of the Gaelic games is much more relaxed. It's very similar to how we send writers out in America. Each writer has their own beat or team, and they go to the games and they ask questions and report on the game. So sponsorship. So each large championship for the sport has its own sponsor with a set amount of money to work through the entire season. So Gaelic football has a sponsorship for $22 million, which is the most that any sponsor has ever gotten, even just the GAA themselves. And it's a sponsorship with the Mobile 3, which is kind of like a one-stop shop for electronics and a cell phone service, kind of like Verizon. And they are the sponsorship of Gaelic football. They make all their Gaelic football stuff. They pay for Canterbury, which is a clothing line, to make all of their things for the players. And all of the players have their phones and just lots and lots of sponsorship there. So the All-Ireland Hurling Championship is sponsored by Etihad. Excuse me if I pronounce that wrong. And it's for $5 million. So hurling in Etihad is for the championship games, and it's specific to hurling. And what Etihad is, it's in a Dubai airline, and it sponsors the actual games with their name all over everything. So it's actually known as the Etihad All-Ireland Hurling Championship. It's not just All-Ireland Hurling Championship. Their name's in there. They're loud and proud. Their branding is all over everything in the stadium when it comes. Every water bottle, every cleat, everything. And so then for the All-Ireland Football Championship, and this is the second one that is very particular to Gaelic football. This one just happens to be the championship. This is obvious. The first one is just for football in general. And this is the championship. So it's sponsored by AIB Bank, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a bank. It's for $4.5 million. And it's been involved with the GAA sponsorships and championships since 1992. So really when the GAA started to pick up momentum, the AIB jumped in and was like, hey, we want to be a part of this. And they've been a sponsor of everything ever since. So and then the GAA has sponsors specific to it. They have Ailses, which is one of Ireland's largest multi-general insurance companies. It's been a proud sponsor since 1993, so they came in right after AIB. So they support the promotion of Gaelic games in primary schools and their sponsorship. And then we have Space Savers, which is one of the largest obstetricians and hearing specialists in the world. Our GAA partners for 4 seasons. So far, they're brand new. They've just signed up. They're going to go for 4 years. They're going to see how they like it, see if they make any money after that, and they're going to go from there. And then Ericsson is the official technology partner of the GAA, and it's advised the GAA of all information of communication technology or related matters, and optimizes mobile connectivity at Croke Park in Dublin. So this brings the fans closer to the action, and these are the sponsors that are specific to the GAA, and they don't necessarily need to sponsor one particular sport in the Gaelic games. So this is just for the association. So licensing programs and partners. So we have OPRO, which announces licensing sponsorship with the Gaelic Athletic Association and Gaelic Players Association. So this is the largest manufacturer of the world's most technically advanced mouthguard. So the OPRO will also provide custom-fitted mouthguards to elite players all across the 32 counties, that compete in the Gaelic games throughout Ireland. So OPRO has the right in the license to use the Gaelic games, the official Gaelic Games mouthguard. They're provided to all of their athletes. So that's one of their first programs and partners that they're with. And then Ericsson, I know we just talked about briefly, but they're the official telecommunications